Welcome back to the Forensic Detailing channel. Now, those of you that follow the channel know that I've recently bought this Porsche 911 996 Carrera Aero Kit car that I love, and I've done a video on this car, and I've got loads of videos to do on this car. I've not cleaned it. Well, it has had like a pre-wash, and I've just vacuumed it out because it's dirty, but it's not detailed. I'll do all that at the end, and I'll go through and do some other videos in a minute on this car and what I've got to do. But this video, and forgive the dodgy camera work because my tripod feet have snapped off, so I'm holding the base of it. This video is all about my BMW M4 CS, which has been in storage for a couple of months. I went and picked it up the other day and like driving it. So I have three cars. I have the black old BMW E36. I have the BMW M4 CS, the F82, and now I have this Porsche. And when I have three performance cars, it starts to get a little bit too much. One will always be in storage, which helps. And then you've always got two that you've got to keep clean. And I find that a little bit difficult personally. The ultimate solution is to find one car that you love, drive it all the time, every day, daily it, do everything in it, love it, keep it really clean and just enjoy it. That's the dream. But you get bored and you always want more than one car. So I was thinking, should I sell the BMW M4 CS and then just have a combo of an E36 328i Sport and the 911? And I could track this 911 car, but I don't want to. So I went and got the M4, and in my head I was thinking the M4 is too fast. It's a little bit too smooth. It's a little bit too refined, kind of. Hard to explain what I'm talking about. The Porsche, when you drive it, it's hard, it's brutal, it's noisy, but it drives amazing. It gets all your senses tingling. Whereas the M4, being a modern kind of car, doesn't have coilovers, you know, all that sort of stuff. A lot smooth, less rattly, tons of torque, ridiculous amount of power the way it gets down the road. But I'm not into power. You're into power when you haven't had it, I think. When you know, as a kid, you get your first fast car and you can get addicted with power and chasing power and stuff like that. But it's never really been about that for me. It's not all about power, really. And I think as you get older, it becomes a bit more like that. Now, let's go and have a look at this M4 CS. Now, it's terrible out here. Terrible out here. Probably not going to be able to hear me. It's blowing a gale. Wet and windy. Horrible, look at it. Every time I sweep the leaves up, more come back. Don't know if you can hear a word I'm saying. We'll have a walk around the car. So it has all this bling carbon fibre lower splitters on it. Has fancy LED adaptive lighting. Has forged alloys, carbon ceramic brakes, 19-inch forged alloys, 20 at the rear, so they're staggered sizes, narrower tyres and wider at the back, carbon fibre roof, carbon fibre bonnet, said about carbon fibre splitters, carbon fibre tail, which is just an aesthetic thing, isn't it? Has it got carbon fibre diffuser as well, hasn't it? Yeah, carbon fibre diffuser, titanium exhaust tips, plastic boot lid, I think. When we go into the car, it has these weight-saving door cards. It's a bit muddy in here. Unfortunately, it's just that time of year. I'm trying to get out of the habit. Oh, let's get inside it. Get out of the weather. I'm trying to get into the habit of not cleaning my car all the time. So, yeah, it's pretty clean. Now, it has the DCT gearbox with 3 main speed settings. So let's just fire it up a second. Ooh. That's good, okay. Yeah, so the DCT box, always get a nice exhaust rattle when I start it up, which I don't know if it's something that needs to be fixed, but that will settle down and drop down in a second. So DCT 3 speeds. If you put it in drive, you can change your gearbox speeds. You see that there moving? Look, that little thing going up. S2 is okay for the road. S3, maybe on a circuit on a dry day, very punchy S3. You know, it can unsettle the car a little bit, that punchiness, but it does, you know, it's aggressive in S3, really aggressive, especially when you're redlining. But I love that. So S2 will do for the road. Its default setting is useless. Why, if you're going to put a default setting on, you need to give people the option to change your default, or else if they don't like the default, it means every time they get in the car, they've got to change the settings. That's a basic thing you should do if you make cars. So every time I get in this car, I have to change settings. So BMW, you need to think about things like that. Why put it in efficient mode on the engine if you're going to have the sport, if you're going to have the suspension and steering wheel in the sport mode? So you'd want, if you're driving in efficient, you should want to go into comfort, because comfort's still pretty stiff, trust me. There's not that much difference between this comfort, sport and stiff suspension, a little bit. I will say this, after having this car for 2 or 3 years, this has got one of the best factory suspension setups that I think I've seen on any road car within this range. The only other car that I've ever driven that had as good a stock suspension setup was Martin's GTI Club Sport S, which was remarkable. So it's settled down now, the valves have opened or closed or whatever they do, and the rattle stops. The DCT gearbox, phenomenal automatic gearbox, you know, dual clutch transmission, I think, or is it double clutch transmission or whatever. Really nice gearbox actually. And of course the advantage of having that dual clutch transmission is you can just dunk it into automatic mode and just cruise along without having to worry about doing the paddles. So this car, for an aggressive car, you can drive it and it can be so relaxing and easy to drive and so low demand. You just poodle along and like you can do long distances with it, and it is absolutely fine. In fact, it's lovely. The only thing is the suspension is quite aggressive, so that's the only thing you might notice, but it's fine on motorways and all that sort of stuff. Really smooth, lovely. Such a good balance actually. If one criticism is with the dynamic or the adaptive suspension, if they could make it softer in its softest setting and harder in its harder, so there's a bigger contrast, that would be really good. But it's very, very good. Love this old analog display. What else about the car don't I like? Well, it's cut down, so you've got no sound system in the doors. You've got one speaker there to save weight, which is pretty ridiculous, really, considering you've got things like heated electric seats, which are heavy. So that whole weight-saving thing, some of it's genuine, and some of it they thought, well, we can't really go too hardcore. But I think really lightweight versions of these seats wouldn't have been out of place in this car, but that costs money, isn't it? Some of these CS versions, they're in between like the CSL and the competition pack, you know, versions, and they don't, well, I say they don't want to spend too much money. They do in some places, like the bonnet, making a carbon fibre bonnet and putting those forged alloys on. That's all expensive stuff. But they did get their money back because these cars were like close to 100 grand new. I was checking prices on these, and this is probably worth about £35,000 now with the mileage, which is, where's the mileage? 36. So it's probably worth about £45,000, something roughly like that, if I was to sell it, which is about £10,000 less than I paid for it 2 or 3 years ago. I think it's getting closer to 3 years. Performance-wise, I think this car, for the sort of money you're paying in its stock form, is about as fast as you're going to get if it's running its Cup 2 tyres for a circuit car for that sort of money. Ooh, actually, that's probably not true, is it? There's probably some other cars that you could get close to this now, because it's you know, it's not a new car, is it, by any means, if you think when it was designed. But it's an incredibly fast car. It really is a fast car, you know, especially on a circuit. What are the downsides of using this for a circuit, for circuit driving? The downsides are it eats its tyres. All modern day BMWs absolutely munch their tyres. They just do, especially the fronts with the engine at the front. Don't know why. The camber setup doesn't help, you know, on the stock suspension. but they just munch tyres. It's me as well, to a ridiculous extreme. The suspension setup doesn't allow you to adjust that front camber, so that's a downside of running this sort of car as a circuit car. I've changed the hubs around, so I run an extra half a degree of negative camber on the front, which just helps slightly, and it's a standard BMW part. So I'm not ricing the car up with coilovers and stuff, which you wouldn't want to do on a CS. You get limited aircon, climate control, to save weight and all that. And I'm absolutely fine with that. I never bother with aircon. Aircon always just for me, is just like something that busts. Something that busts as the car gets older. It's another thing to fix later on. It's like, okay. It's nice if you live in a hot climate. In the UK, it's nice maybe in the middle of summer every now and then, but generally this, I'll stick it on cold and it's fine. Oh, it does have aircon, does it? Oh, there's something limited about this. It's not dual zone or whatever. Who knows? Who cares? Apart from that, I love this cabin. I think it's really good. The sound system isn't too bad. I love the way it drives. I've said many times it's too fast for the road, and I was thinking about selling it. Went and got it the other day, drove it back home, and just loved it again. It's not a case of falling back in love with it. I have never fallen out of love of this car. I remember when I wanted to get it and I was just like so hooked and obsessed, and like, when you want a car and you're just like looking and looking and looking and looking, you really want it. Like whenever I think about selling it, I just put my mind back into that frame when I was really like desperate to get one. And I still have that same love of this car. I still got love for the streets. I really do love this car, and I don't think I can ever see me selling it, but I was thinking about it. So that's hence this video. But I think I've come to the conclusion, no, because I just love the car too much. I think it might be, for me, one of the most underrated cars that BMW have ever made. The CSs, like the modern day CSs, like perhaps with the, I don't think they did them on, did they do them on the E92? I can't remember. I think they probably did, I can't remember. But the CS with the M2 and the M4 were really good. Like they really made them a lot better than that competition model. Like the CS M2 was much, it was car of the year, wasn't it? Evo car of the year, I think. Highly praised that it was really good. And I think this was underrated. They never really spoke about how good the M4 CS was because of the fact they didn't offer it in the manual gearbox. Would a manual gearbox work on this car? Probably. You'd lose a lot of the performance, so BMW didn't want to do it. Manuals were always rare in the C4. There is a bit of limited space here under here with your feet. Like the clutch would be a little bit shoehorned in. I think you'd be all right. But where the clutch would be, there, it would just put a little bit of a twist on your knee to get it. And you get that twist in the 2 Series. When you drive a manual, it twists your knees, because I had an M240 manual. It's got the same pedal layout as the M2. And whenever I used to drive on track with my 240, at the end of the track day, my left knee was killing me because you were slightly twisted. So it was almost like they shoehorned the manual in, and that was a big problem for me. Whenever I did long drives, I get a dodgy knee in the 2 Series, and my head was bashing off the roof and the side rails with it. It wasn't quite a big enough cockpit for me. And the quality of the cockpit in the M4 CS compared to the M2 CS was a lot better, like all this leather dash and like Alcantara. But anyway, you're splitting atoms, aren't you? Because the M2 CS is pretty bloody amazing as well. Great cars, but yeah, this was the right choice for me, I think. The performance of it is phenomenal. The torque and the acceleration. I'd missed it. So the other day I was on the road, a completely private place, and just wanted to do a little pull. And I had all the traction control off and everything like that, and it was all wet and greasy and there was leaves. So you'd have all got very upset with me. And I just did a little pull, and I was expecting it to sort of judder because it would lose traction again, but it didn't. So the rear end of this car is quite clever. It's doing stuff. I'm convinced it's doing stuff. how could it be doing stuff when you've got the traction control fully turned off? Well, maybe it's just the way the diff works or whatever, but the way it puts down its rear power is quite good. For it to break traction, you know, it can do it. The engine's at the front. It's got masses of power, so you can break traction whenever you like, but you have to really drive it quite heavy-footed. You know, you have to be quite irresponsible. Oh, fucking hell, like that. Like putting your foot on the accelerator when you're in gear. You know, you have to respect the car, but you have to respect any rear-wheel drive car that's got more than 400 brake horse, and this has got 460. But it's got bad because of torque, and once it digs in, it really accelerates rapidly, faster than you would ever really want to on the road, very fast on a circuit. The brakes on it, carbon ceramics. Now you hear, word on the street, people put in the comments on my videos, carbon ceramics are no good for track days. You know, they're bloody brilliant for track days. They are brilliant. They do not. So the thing with brakes is, you know, brakes are all about, performance brakes aren't about how hard you brake, okay, and how quickly you stop. You stop the same, don't you, in all of your cars, because you put your foot on the brake and you could lock the wheels, and if you press too hard on the brake, the anti-lock brake will kick in. So you could do that with cheap brakes. When you put performance brakes, or you have different brakes, it's basically creating an alternative braking system that operates differently in different temperatures. So like performance brakes can carry on operating in higher temperatures, or they might have cooling to maintain temperatures, but they're designed to maintain your braking system so it works and it can handle the heat better and operate in higher temperatures. The carbon ceramics seem better than that, than the stock steels by a long way. So you'd have to be upgrading your stock steels if you've got one without the carbon ceramics, which will cost you money. The bonus of the carbon ceramics is you're really not going to have to change the discs that often, thank God, because they're about 1,500 quid a corner, something like that. Don't quote me on the price, I haven't had to do it yet. The pads, the stock front pads would be about 400 quid or something like that. The stock carbon ceramics would be about 660. If you're a hero, you can run Paget RSC, which are slightly better than the stock pads. Never take anyone's word for it on what pads to use. You know, if you go on a forum Googling, what pad should I run in my Mark 1, you know, Ford Escort, you know, for track? Don't ever take anyone's word for that. Speak to people that sell brakes and stuff like that, and try stuff and try different ones and learn from your own experience, because the people that recommend brake pads on forums don't really tend to know their derriere from their elbow, and you know, they've been told to run this, and as soon as they run it in their car, it's automatically the best thing ever. You can't take recommendations like that with any validity. You have to do it all yourself. Same with tyres, really. Yeah, in terms of reliability, what faults have you had with this car over the years? I have had one lambda sensor go. That's it, and that happened fairly recently, and that was very cheap to fix. BMR sorted that for me. Brilliant, because no disrespect to my main dealer, but I couldn't just book it in to replace the lambda sensor. And I knew it was a lambda sensor because I swapped them over and the error went from bank 1 to bank 2. So I knew it was the lambda sensor, but BMR were prepared to just change it for me, you know, without charging me to diagnose it, which was great. So it was only about 80 quid or something like that to fix the lambda sensor. Apart from that, I sometimes get fuel starvation on certain circuits if I run very low on fuel and I do a long sweeping right-hander. I get a drivetrain error. You've seen me demo. It's happened to me a couple of times. It happened on Bedford once, I think, and it happened at Goodwood for me, low on fuel. So it doesn't happen that often. You've really got to be cornering quick to slosh the petrol out and create that fuel starvation. So just run it above a quarter tank, you'll be absolutely fine. It does eat its tyres. It is quite heavy on the brakes. 1,550 kilos is relatively light now for a modern car. You know, for a car of this sort of shell size, if you like. That's one of the reasons I'm probably never ever going to buy another BMW, which is a really sad thing to say. I love the brand, one of my favourite brands. But all of their modern stuff now is above 1,700 kilos. Even their 2 Series, which I like the look of the new M2, but it's just getting too heavy and too big. It's bigger than this. It's heavier than this. It should be getting lighter. But when you put more power into a car, you need that weight so the car can put its power down. So they can make power isn't a problem anymore, but putting it down is. So the solution is weight, and what that gives you is a car that will go around a circuit very, very rapidly. So every iteration of BMW will get quicker and quicker, but it'll be a lot harder on its tyres and a lot more expensive to fuel it. And this already guzzles fuel. Yeah, and a different feel. You know, it's nice to have a light car which is a bit kind of skittish. You know, you're having to fight it, you're feeling the grip and all that. Heavy car kind of, when it goes big. So yeah, BMW now have been forced, I think, to go the way of Audi and Mercedes to compete with them. Because nowadays, you know, a really reputable kind of review company, you know, like, who's reputable? You know, that really analyse the car that come out, if that exists nowadays. They don't count for as much as getting a load of cars, you know, and sticking them on a runway, and you know, the fastest one there gets all the plaudits. And that isn't the fault of the reviewing companies or the companies making runway reviews or the lack of good quality reviews. It's the thought of the people that watch them. So, you know, companies will make whatever's popular. So you guys basically don't want to watch proper reviews of cars. You'd rather just see them on a runway in a 2-minute review where you're told how fast they are and which one comes first. That's because 99% of people, as you know, are idiots. So it's not really worth doing an in-depth review of cars and talking about all the interesting stuff like we do. But yeah, because no one's interested. But anyway, that's the way we roll. We'll talk about what I find interesting. Where was I? So the M4 CS for me is a much underrated car, very underrated car with blistering performance, good handling, good suspension, brilliant brakes, looks amazing. And here's the thing, right? You could take, you know, like a £200,000 supercar, and essentially that £200,000 supercar will have a shell, it'll have a carbon fibre bonnet, it'll have a carbon fibre roof, it'll have carbon ceramic brakes, it'll have forged alloys, it'll have a twin turbo engine that's roughly the same sort of power. This on paper has got all of the things that supercars have got. It's all good quality. This Alcantara has not gone cheap. But the seats are all good quality. Everything in here is like good quality, but you can also drive it around and not feel like it's too ostentatious. Imagine driving around in a Zonda or, you know, like a Lamborghini and stuff. It's a little bit too much, and you put it in a car park and someone will, you know, they'll be all over it, you know, either looking at it, admiring it, sitting on the bonnet, or keying it out of disgust because they think you've got too much money. Whereas this just looks like a 4 Series with some little, you know, go faster bits on it. So it's a subtle car for me, relatively subtle anyway. People that know about cars still know it's a fast, kind of brutish car. Yeah, that's it for me. So really, the M4 CS, I don't think I could ever let myself sell this car. This for me is a car which I love driving on a motor circuit. Getting to the motor circuit is an absolute pleasure and it's easy. You know, I'm not bolted in, you know, into a racing seat with harnesses on me and that. It's just too much at my age. So it's got a good balance. It really is a weapon though, it really is. And that still carries a little bit of excitement for me, even though I've said many times it's way too fast. It's ludicrous. If I got my hands on one of these when I was in my 20s or 30s, I would be dead. There is no two ways about it. Nowadays, I'm a little bit more sensible most of the time. Yeah, love this car. Don't quote me on it, but I don't think I'll ever get rid of it because it's just not worth it. John, you track this car, you're going to destroy it, you're going to decimate it. No, I don't think really that's the case. Not with what I'm doing with it, you know, not enough. In another 5 years' time, I'll put a new front windscreen in it because it's picked up chips, not from the track, ironically. And I'll get the front bumper painted and probably the front bonnet and the wings, get those painted up nicely, get the front splitter refurbished, recoated or whatever, flattened back and revarnished. And then the car will be fine again. The mechanical kind of strain on the car, I don't think it's too much really. Probably the gearbox, you know, it probably doesn't thank me for that. The engine, I've got a feeling, will be absolutely fine. You know, it's not a lazy engine. It's like, it's a torquey engine, but it just feels like there's a lot more for the engine to give. In fact, one of the things with this car on a circuit is you can't quite drive it in the high rev ranges as you might like to. You know, it wants you to drop gears sensibly and use all that torque all the way through. If you try and drive it up in the high rev range, like if it was a manual and you're really keeping it in there, sometimes it doesn't give you the gear, I've noticed, when you really, really want to, you know, do some, you really want to go for it. So it likes the change. It doesn't like staying up here and then a down change to here. It doesn't like that. It's a big, torquey, beefy engine. It wants you to use that full rev range. Never do noise. So the M4 CS, brilliant cars. In fact, if I didn't have one, I would probably look maybe for an M4 manual comp. Or a pre-comp manual, I think, if they did those. You can pick up for less than 30 grand and you can put a stage 1 map on it. You're pretty much there, a brake upgrade, and you're pretty much there. As a track car, that would be an amazing track car, that would be a serious weapon. The only downside is the stock suspension limits your what you can do with the Geo, you know, in the camber. It doesn't have a good enough camber setup. So if you're tracking regularly, you're going to want to go to coilovers probably, or do the hub or the camber plates, but then you start getting hardcore. So I don't think the M4 necessarily makes a good hardcore track car, because then you compromise it for the road. I don't know what would, but there you go. So M4 CS, brilliant car, love it, keeping it. Let me know your thoughts. Doug.